to this computer. All right, you're on. Go ahead.
Um,
You can share to the screen and do all that other stuff.
I'm trying to get my PowerPoint up here.
Danny has his grandson, so he won't be on tonight.
Okay. Um, I'm not, hang on, Pat, where I hit the, I hit the, I hit my,
I'm pushing allow, so you should
there.
be okay.
Can you see the screen?
I can't see it right now, but I'm hoping it comes up pretty quick. I just got a thing that said allow, so share your screen.
Okay. I think that's, I hit the share the screen thing. Can you see my slide?
Don't see it yet. Grant, give me a little instruction here. What do I need to do?
Um, Larry, do you have your slide minimized in the background?
I don't know. Where would
Okay,
I find
okay,
that?
okay, okay. All right. Uh, Minimize your your
Camera?
your yeah minimize your Zoom thing.
Oh boy.
Okay. Top. See the red button up
Wait,
top.
just a minute.
Okay.
Um, on my screen.
Yes. So on
Oh,
your
I got
what's
it
your
there.
okay, yeah, it's a yellow button. Okay. All right, tell me what's showing on your screen right now.
On my screen, I have the
It's your
title.
PowerPoint. So your PowerPoint is up, right?
Yes, the PowerPoint's up.
Okay, all right. Okay, go back to your Zoom screen.
Okay. Um,
Okay, and down at the bottom there should be a green button down there that says share.
yep. Wait a minute. I got it.
Do you see that?
What's going on here? Jesus, this is,
Okay, just relax. We'll get it.
well, my God.
Hey Pat, hit pause recording.
Yeah. Yes. Um,
Okay,
Yep, go ahead.
you're on.
okay. Um, this slide series or PowerPoint series is a accumulation of about 60 years. So it starts with an overview and teaching of movement sequence. And uh, every time I have presented, I've always used this introduction. And when I say that, I'm talking about when I get in front of a group of individuals, many people in the group do not know me. So my first thought is people don't really care who you are until they know that you really care. And throughout my career, I've uh, I've run into some awesome individuals and some individuals that perhaps aren't as motivated as others. And there is no single recipe for success in life, but there is certainly one essential ingredient, and that to me is passion. Um, Passion means a lot of things to many people. And when I use the word passion, I guess I'm primarily, we have lots of passions in a lot of different areas. But in terms of our profession, if your presence doesn't really make an impact, your absence won't make any difference. And how true that is. I've been very blessed in my career. I've taught at multiple educational levels, from elementary to middle school to junior high to high school. And I did a short stint at college. I've coached multiple sports, and I have been, in my 60-year career, I've coached something and taught something in the neighborhood of 35,000 students and athletes. And I've been very blessed to be part of their journey, and I have been very blessed to have them part of mine. All of this, I don't believe anyone is an island, and I have a very special thanks for a lot of people that have helped me along the way. And there are a number of you that are viewing this tonight that I'm thankful for. To start, I believe that every physical education program, sports program, staff, students, families, communities throughout this entire country are all different and unique. And therefore, it would be very arrogant of me to tell you how, what, and when you should do to conduct your program. And to be truthful, there are no perfect programs. And therefore, as a result, watching my slide presentation, I take what is useful and discard what is not. This presentation is designed to more or less help you at least look at your program and hopefully help you make it the best. Last presentation, Grant talked about LTAD. And when it comes to sport movement, LTAD is certainly part of it. And LTAD, in my opinion, is nothing more than an attempt to revive old, good physical education programs. And LTAD is different than what it used to be, but we still have to, regardless of how good or how bad it may be, we still have to be able to teach and review proper sport movement, correct positions, and reinforce, obviously, the good parts of the program. So as we go through this, where do we start? How does it start? Well, perhaps three areas are the most fundamental to a young person. And that's part of teaching, coaching, and parenting. And I was fortunate enough to attend some stuff with Vern Gambetta's, and one of his infamous 4 parts of teaching and coaching is, well, his foundation is pedagogy, supported by science, acquired by experience, and tested in a variety of circumstances. Teaching and coaching is not about just training, technique, strategy. It's about the individual. And with this, we have to remember kids have feelings, emotions. So it's not just about grades and yards and wins and losses and numbers, etc. And the quality programs are the coaches, parents, and teachers that follow the progress. Ultimately, I guess every program no matter what level, wants every individual to have an emotional, physical component to perform at their optimal levels and create a championship culture. And this is done with the support of teammates, parents, teachers, coaches. And I've always been an advocate of a program success in reality, to me, is based on 3 things: information, education, and communication at all levels from K to 12. It's based on, I believe, strength, power, speed, agility, stamina, endurance regarding the specific sport. Where did the journey begin? We, it's funny, when we look or think or image of what long-term athletic development really is, we often look at the child. And obviously, in a perfect world, that's where it all starts. But that isn't always what occurs. We worry about the child of tomorrow and we forget really who they are today. I Both Pat and I use this little guy in almost every presentation. And I use him because in reality, if you look at his position, his head, his torso, his knees, his feet, his hip position, lumbar area, um, is about as good as you could ever expect. And we see him, and nobody ever taught him how to get into this position. No one ever taught him all the elements of a base of support and center of mass and line of force and all this. It's just a natural occurrence. We take a child at this age with the flexibility and the innocence and the awareness that he has of being able to not fall over, and we put them in a traditional school in a chair for 8 hours a day. And we, excuse me, and we do almost everything we can do to inhibit their ability to move. So, based on this, let's talk about the area of just movement, being physically educated. Obviously, it's the center of youth development, and it teaches us how to act, interact, and react. And quite frankly, it's the primary vehicle for exploration, and experimentation. And what a tremendous uh, facility or object to allow kids to move. So, along with this, are we really truly helping athletes achieve their goals? Obviously, we'll look at this young child, and as we watch other kids move and athletes move, it doesn't always appear to be quite the way it should be. Now, this is an infamous video or a series of slides. This is RG3, I believe, in the 2014 um, uh, football. Well, there's a word for it, coach, and I can't think of it. That's not fun. Anyway, long story short, um, if you will look at the top right, the lower left, the middle left, you will see a huge flaw in knee position. This is called valgus. And valgus is I believe, a true predictor of knee injury. And it's just an extreme force on the knee itself. And RG3's career ended, I'm not sure, 17 or 18 with a knee injury. So, somewhere along the line, some coach allowed this to happen and it continued, and the result is the result. A lot of occurrences happen in sport, especially in youth sport. We today, our youth completely over compete and under prepare or under train. And a lot of parents, uh, communities look at only the tip of the iceberg and they do not see what is really truly needed. And the basis and foundation for athletic performance occurs far beyond just the season itself. And there is a sequential development that is so needed with the sport coach, the strength coach, the physical education teacher, that can truly help with avoiding injuries and helping that individual or individuals improve performance. I'd like to spend maybe a couple of minutes of how do we, over the last 3 or 4 decades, have seen some things that are not the best in terms of athletic, especially youth athletics. In terms of just youth itself, we're seeing an extreme sedentary lifestyle. Avery Feigenbaum at the College of New Jersey has coined this as education deficit disorder. And it has caused a tremendous problem. Obesity, 51% of middle school age kids can be identified as obese. And a lot of sport participation, but not really physically prepared to play the game. In terms of youth athletics, the data that is up here, 45 million people or kids and adolescents participate in a variety of sports on a yearly basis. 3.5 billion end up with some type of serious medical injury. CDC has, quite frankly, labeled youth athletics as a huge health risk for kids. And the tragedy of all of this is most injuries are preventable, either with what occurs as either improper technique or overuse. Now, the APA, the American Pediatric Association, has some guidelines. The kid's age equals the number of hours that child should be in a sport. And that includes games and practices. So if a kid is 10 years old, 10 hours a week is the guideline for activity in a sport. Some of the problems, obviously, that occur with these injuries are either performance limitations or certainly neuromuscular sport injuries, poor overall strength levels, incorrect landing and change of direction mechanics, inefficiency in terms of flexibility and mobility, quad and limb dominance, and even the insufficient acceleration and running techniques, all of which are detrimental and certainly contribute to injury. And probably maybe the most devastating aspect of youth sports that has occurred is sports specialization. It has just become a monster. And it has ruined more programs and more kids than it ever should have.
Larry, Larry, excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The part where you said if a kid is 10, he needs to spend 10 hours a week on his sport.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what the American Pediatric Association recommends for youth. This would be in an organized youth sport. If you're 10 years old, 10 hours a week.
Okay, so what you're saying is that 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, they should be practicing their sport. How long is that? Is that all year round? Is that just the season? What is that?
As far as I know, that's year round.
I think that one of the things you have to put in there
I'm a
when
little
you say that, in a
confused.
sense, Grant, is that there is another statistic out there that says 75% of what they do should be practice and only 25% game. And that is probably where we screw up more than anything else because we have these kids in these 8 and 10 hour tournaments all weekend long.
Yeah.
No,
That's
I
the
understand
killer.
that. I understand that, but what I'm confused on is that, um, uh, you're asking a 10-year-old to spend 2 hours a day practicing a sport year round. When is he going to play the other sports?
Right. That's the tragedy with sports specialization.
Well,
I
but
think that
what?
also refers, I think that refers to the total time in the sport. So that would include games. So
Okay,
when you look
no,
at
I under,
practice,
okay,
that's the issue. Practicing skills is one thing, but they're playing more games than they are practice. And
Right.
they're playing 7 hours a game and 3 hours of practice. It should be the other way around.
okay, I understand that, and so and I agree with that part of it, but I'm a little confused on what Larry's saying here as to if he practices, let's say he plays one game a week and he's practicing 8 hours and he's playing 2 hours, where does the physical development come in? There's no physical development in that. There's only we're talking. You're talking in that scenario. You're talking sports specialization.
Right.
Go back to that slide, Larry.
That's where I'm thinking. I think I know what you're saying. I got it confused in my head. Is what the problem is.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
let's
what
look at
they're
if I
I
could,
think
go
what
ahead.
they're trying to do is to limit the amount of time that a kid um, actually spends um, through the day, and especially as Pat said, these long tournaments. There are kids that get in, 8 to 12, 8 to 10 games in a weekend,
Oh,
five or six.
yeah, I agree with that part of it, but still, you're saying that, or at least I think you're saying that a kid should spend 2 hours a day working on his sport at 10 years old.
No, I don't think that's exactly true. I think they're
No,
trying to look at, just my opinion, I think they're trying to look at, the CDC says that you should have 60 minutes a day of activity. And that should be somewhat it should be play, but there should be something in there on developmental. I think what happens is what we're seeing is the 10 hours is being spent just on a sport and not on overall activity. So
Uh,
when I look at this thing, I think that that's what we're seeing because again, the injuries are preventable and overuse. What's happening is they're taking that 10 hours, Grant, and they're doing
yeah,
exactly what you're saying. They're just playing baseball, or they're just playing
yeah,
soccer. That kid could
that's
be
a
doing
sport
other things.
specific that they're trying to limit. Is
Right.
more so the play than anything else. The game, the game content.
okay, I got you. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, along with the sports specialization, it becomes this sports dilemma. Studies reveal that 70% of the youth ages 6 and 7 that participate in a sport will drop out by age 13. Now, the Aspen Institute has been coming up with some studies, and they are leaning that age from 13 goes down to 11, which is just absolutely tragic. There is no reason that we're having kids drop out, and most generally than any, or more tragic part is once they drop out, oftentimes they drop out of physical activity completely. And that creates all sorts of difficult and health problems, especially from youth. And reason for the dropout, in each one of us could add 6 more to this. But the bottom line is these are 6. As I said, each one of us could come up with probably another 6 each. So there are a lot of reasons why kids drop out, but the bottom line is they are, in some way, shape, or form, this has to change. So let's talk a little bit about the kid that continues success at an individual for an individual player, and that journey to the next level is a myriad of factors: training experience, commitment, potential for improvement in motor skills, technical skills, athleticism, anthropometrics, body size, fat, etc., and just personal, social, and cultural factors. One of the big dilemmas that I see, especially in youth sport programs, on the left, the talent selection versus talent identification. I think a lot of programs, um, especially at the earlier youth, tend to pick a child that has matured earlier for their age, and instead of what are the physical characteristics of this child? What is that child's potential for motor skill development, technical skill development, just overall athleticism? And oftentimes a kid is overlooked because they don't either have the size or some of the maturity some coaches look for. So I think it's very important for youth programs to be aware of these two elements when they try to build a youth program. So speaking of building a youth program, let's start at the local level. And quite frankly, if it doesn't happen at the local level, it isn't going to happen. And I threw a couple of things up on the screen. Planning the journey, what are the available tools, what are the pathways, what are the times, et cetera, all of which have an effect on the program itself. So first of all, if we look at I'll use the word players, and what I mean by that are the impact on the student or athlete, the sport coach, the PE program, the youth sport program, clubs, trainers, strength coach, parents, etc., all of which have some kind of effect, whether it be positive or negative. And those are in fact a huge factor. The next thing I'd like to look at is just the program. And when I say program, I'm talking whether it be a sport program or whether it be a physical education program, whether it be a youth program or whatever. And I think it's vital that every program have an evaluation. What are the current goals and objectives? How does the current program work? What programs work well? What programs need improvement? How is achievement actually measured? And very important is what is a 5 or a 10-year goal plans? What are they? What's vital in terms of needs of these? And then obviously some vital elements in service for staff at all levels, commitment to a multi-sport development. Along with that, other elements that are so needed for the program itself. And next, the educational. And I think it's so vital that these have the courage to be patient. Individuals at all ages are different, unique, different interests, characteristics, and capabilities. And the learning environment, they come into a learning environment with different stages of skills, development, passion, and knowledge. And therefore, instruction, drills, whatever word you want to, have to be modified. They have to challenge the more advanced or more talented kid, but yet provide time for, the kid that really needs time to develop and learn. And then the program detail is critical. Attention to detail is very important. And it's teach, review, reinforce. And there are all sorts of difficulties with this, with coaches, et cetera, but they've got to learn that there are standards on what's acceptable. And the program goal is to always prepare that individual for the next level. And I like the idea of win the day. And what I mean by win the day is I want that kid to be at least satisfied with his or her performance, that they're willing to come back tomorrow. And this win the day thing to me is vital. And I don't care if it's in movement or whatever. We've always used the illusion, if I give you a basketball and you throw that, and you're standing under the hoop and you throw it up at the basket 100 times and you miss 99, there's not a lot of incentive to want to come back tomorrow. So I believe the instruction and the drill technique has to be so that a kid feels that they've accomplished something. So there is a motive to come back. And last week, Grant talked about LTAD. And one of the things I've always asked my class is, I get every class, I have a question. What do you want to be? A Ferrari or a dump truck? And I've never had a class where kids say, oh, I want to be a dump truck. Well, my next comment from that is, okay, so if you want to do this, we've got some work ahead of us. And we want to provide a program that will teach and help an individual become a better athlete. I don't care about whether they're a better football player or basketball player or baseball or volleyball or softball. I want them to be the best athlete possible, and then let them or allow them to choose the sport that they want to play in. And you know as well as I do, we look at a kid at perhaps middle school or high school, and we say, oh my goodness, that kid was just an awesome soccer player. Well, that awesome soccer player could have been a great basketball player if he or she would have chosen. Once they're a good athlete, a sports skill is. I think any kid could play any sport they wanted if they're a good athlete. And then obviously we want to develop them so that they can perform at their best optimal level. And this all starts with what Grant talked about last week, literacy. And if you Google the term, there are, I don't know, 14 different types of literacy. I took 2. And I think we all understand cognitive literacy. It's a very objective form of evaluation. Your ability to read, comprehend, interpret, analyze, and demonstrate. And we look at that, we say, okay, how do we get there? Well, everything's based on fundamentals. If you want to learn how to read in the English language, or if you want to learn how to read in Russian or Chinese or whatever, it starts with the alphabet. And we happen to have 26 letters in the English language. Taking those 26 after you've identified it, you can put two letters together and form a word, or a few more letters and form a different word, etc. But pretty soon you have a sentence, a paragraph, a page, a chapter, a book. But it takes time. I always ask kids, who taught you how to read? And they'll say, well, mom or my brother or my dad or my uncle or whoever. And I always say, how long did that take you? And they'll give you a number of whatever. But there's always someone to help with the process. But it's very objective. CAT is CAT. And we can go to numeracy, where we're able to add and divide and subtract and multiply. But regardless of there are only 10 letters or 10 numbers, I'm sorry. And you take those 10 numbers and you say, oh, okay. And as I said, we can multiply and divide and subtract and add, etc. And it seems pretty simple. And then you say, well, how did Musk get up to the in space and bring back the astronauts? Well, as complicated and as detailed, and obviously there are computers that are doing all this, but they still have to have the fundamental numbers to make it operate, which is pretty amazing. And obviously, calculation of numbers like that are pretty detailed. Physical literacy, however, is a little different. We look at a small child and they're on their back and their feet and arms move, and you'll see this. And we can't hardly wait till they turn over. And then we can't hardly wait till they crawl. And then we can't hardly wait till they can stand. And then we can't hardly wait till they walk. And then, oh my God, they're everywhere. But you ask a kid, who taught you to turn over? Who taught you to crawl? Who taught you to stand up? Who taught you to take that first step? And they go blank and they, well, I see. Well, we learn by observing. But physical literacy, so much more less specific. If we all lined up on one wall and we all ran to the other wall, somebody would be first and somebody would be last. And our problem was we always focus on, oh my goodness, George, you were first. Oh, well, and Henry, you were absolutely last. But thank goodness Henry got there. But the bottom line is even George was, no matter how fast he was, etc., he perhaps we all had some physical movements that weren't the most competent. It doesn't mean that we couldn't move, but they weren't as perfected as much as possible. And the bottom line of that is, yeah, I got there, or we got there, etc. But in sport, we can make I got there a little better. So the bottom line of all of this is if you can teach a child to read, comprehend, interpret, and demonstrate information, you can teach a kid how to move in all spectrums of sport. But there is a means and method of doing all this. Now, this is my 60 years. It doesn't mean that it's original, and it doesn't mean that it's the only one, but it took a long time for me to conceptualize how all of this sort of goes together and looks, etc. Notice I use K to 12. Because if you look at statistics, out of every 100 kids, boys and girls, like a maximum of 5 will go on after grade 12 to play at the college or professional level. And of the 5, that's including ever D3 and D2 and D1. But when it comes down to D1 with, the top 5 schools or the top 10 schools or whatever, that quickly goes down to about 2. So we're trying to capture 12 years of activity that a child can enjoy. So starting on the left, we have our basic fundamentals, program foundation, physical literacy in the vocabulary, and then fundamental movements. And I'll come back to this in a minute. And additional skills of balance and hip mobility and object control. And everything's moving to our right with dynamic movements onto strength. And I'm the first one, and I'm the first one to admit, most of this presentation is on, quote, movement only. And movement only doesn't work without strength and power. But that's a total different presentation, and Pat and Danny will take care of that aspect. So it isn't that I'm trying to ignore strength or movement, not at all. It's just I'm focused on just movement, etc. But plyo technique headed towards plyo, speed technique headed towards speed, and then speed technique and speed and agility all involved in the aspect of deceleration, transitional movement, change of direction, acceleration, and how all this sort of comes together. Now, along with this, the whole program is a successful program is based on the athletic development and sports performance is on quality of programs, quality of teaching, and commitment on the part of kids. This is when the program becomes the best it can be. Now, the quality of I think I skipped something. I want to go back for. No, I didn't. I apologize. The quality of program cannot exceed the quality of the staff. It just can't. And skills will either rise to the highest level of your expectation or sink to the lowest level of your tolerance. So it comes down to training the trainers and how we can help with just getting information, etc. And the foundation of a program, of a sports program, is obviously in service, I believe. It helps the teacher, parent, coach, etc. understand exercise selection, proper movement technique, sequence, and progression. And along this whole part becomes developing a coach's eye. And we'll come back to Pell here in a minute, but it comes down to attention to detail. And I always talk to coaches and staff about, are you doing drills or are you teaching skills? And doing drills is like teaching a kid improper movement and saying it's okay. It takes time to teach and correct. The K-12 program that we've used has always been based on objective-based sport program. And in reality, we only really have 4 major objectives from K to 12. First of all, developing proper and multiple sport movement skills, the entire range of skills. And then can you demonstrate those skills in a competitive environment? And along with all of that, developing a perceptual information to formulate movement decisions. And then with that proper movement decisions, can you move correct solutions? So those are pretty wide open, but basically that's what happened. So this is the program that we've used for, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. And it's divided into 5 areas. Now, is it a knockoff of Ballet's long-term athletic? Yep, it is. I don't know a sequential LTAD program that isn't based on Ballet's or the Canadian model. We use 5, and I'll explain why. But you, as a viewer, if you wanted to use 3 or you wanted to change them to a 1, 2, 3 or ABC or whatever, there's not anything in stone on this. It's always open. It's always available, or it's always open for improvement. We use, and you'll see the pyramid is divided because between or at each level, there is a proficiency barrier. And our goal is to set a good foundation of fundamentals and foundation. That's it. And as I said when I first started, this is not age group. Over my last 5 years of just coaching, we ran a summer program where we had youth first or kindergarten, first, second, third in a group, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then etc. And it was interesting because I was able to move from youth all the way to 12th grade. And in the 5, 6 years that we did this, it was amazing that I could see seniors having the same fundamental flaws as kindergartners, except they were able to, I don't know if the word's adjust, adapt, maybe, I don't know. But they still had some basic flaws that a kindergartner kid had. So anyway, we started with fundamentals and foundation. Development is the crucial, that is the absolute most important level. And I truly believe that a kid at the 8th grade needs to be competent and capable of doing the developmental stage before they enter high school. So and this program has 2, I'll use the word 2 goals on the side. Fundamental foundation and development is developing potential. Can you be a great athlete? And then the application and performance is to improve performance. Those are the 2 outside parameters that we're trying to achieve. So what's this look like in an educational setting? The program is divided into 5 developmental sequential areas. Level 1 is K through 2. Now, in a perfect world, this would be in the physical education classes. I've never seen this happen. I'd love to have it happen, but I've never seen it happen. So we have to use our from the standpoint of summer programs and in our strength program of K2, the fundamental stage foundation, level 3, and these are 3 years. And with level 2, I'm sorry, with level 1 especially, but level 2, short, very short 5-minute presentations, let them play, and then come back to another 4 to 5 minutes of instruction, let them play. They're so used to a short attention span. There's no reason to try to force something past that. Level 3, we start to develop a far more deliberate practices. Level 4 and 5 is really, we divide that into two, 9th, 10th grade. I would, which is our application and performance stage, and I'll explain these in the next session. But I want to get them to the performance stage. If a 9th grader can get to the performance phase, in the 9th grade, that's it. That's great. They're not stuck at the application stage if they can move to the performance stage. But everything is based on, can you demonstrate a competent or optimal skill level for each one of these levels? Okay, and then how's this work? So the first year, we just introduce and teach the basic element. The second year, we want them to improve their skills and enhance their techniques. And if they're in a 3-year program or 3-year aspect, we want them to really demonstrate a competent skill level. And if they're like at the high school, we want them to develop the optimal skills. Again, the program foundations are information. The information part is understanding, supporting the program and how it works. And there is a sequential and a process of developing it. And it doesn't mean we're holding kids back. If a kid can move all the way, that's wonderful. That's awesome. That's awesome. But we want to make sure that a kid, I go back to wins the day. How well, I want them to return. I want them to have the passion to come back and try to improve. And the education part is just skills and knowledge. And then communication is with staff, parents, students, and athletes at all levels. And then the benchmarks. What's the program doing? How's the level of instruction? This is where the program evaluation comes in. How did we do? How are we doing? We get feedback from the kids. We want the kids to be truthful. How was your instructor? How was the coach? How can it get better? Because we can't improve until we know what's needed to improve or how, etc. And is the program meeting the needs? Are the kids getting what they want? And etc. And then the program itself. And then one of the things I always talk about kids and especially coaches and especially parents, this came from provocative coaching. And there are really 4 levels of development, if you will, skill development. There's a comfort zone, a fear zone, a learning zone, and a growth zone. And a comfort zone is I feel comfortable. I'm when I don't really have this awesome passion to get better. I'm just comfortable where I am. And the problem with that, there's no growth. And ultimately, over my career, I found that the first 1,000 reps of doing something, a lot of times their skill level sucks. And especially in Olympic weightlifting. The learning zone, the second 1,000 reps, technique gets better. And the third 1,000 reps, they're starting to look pretty. I often walk up to a kid and say, that looks disgustingly good. And that always brings a smile, and I love it. But there is and I think a lot, we tend to want to compress time. And I have no problem compressing time if the kid is capable of doing this, but it takes time to learn and it takes time to develop. There's a term called building body armor, and it's the myelinization of, of the substance in the connective tissue, the brain, etc. And it just takes time to develop that. And and we can't rush the process. And and it's that old adage, pay me now or pay me later. And it's much easier to do it in a controlled environment versus, oh my goodness, this is a disaster. And here's the first phase. We just introduced fundamental capacities, basic movement, stability, basic object control. Balloons. We use a lot of balloons with kids just because they don't move as fast as a ball does, and they've got time, and we can do some basic plyometrics. And it's just some body and spatial awareness, and trying to get them just basic fundamental stuff. And that's just introduction to terminology and a static movement. What we use in our program as static is I may push off and take a step in any one of four directions, but if I'm in a static, I'm going to return back. If I'm going to do dynamic, I'm going to take a step and then bring the support foot, and we continue to move. So kids understand that, and basic balance and basic stability and body weight exercise. We start with like doing push-ups, we'll do incline push-ups, and we'll do incline pull-ups, and a lot of just body weight stuff, etc. And then I want them to be active outside the training area. Go for a bike ride, go for a swim, climb a tree, swim, skate, you name it. Go for a walk. Get off your dead butt and move. And then just basic fundamental object control. Can you catch? Can you throw? Can you kick? Can you strike? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we also introduced some just basic language that the programs, the entire school uses. Like, how would you have your kids get into athletic position? And I don't care if you're playing softball or if you're in hockey. I don't, and what's the difference between a power position and what direction is lineal and what direction is lateral and what direction is diagonal and what direction is vertical, etc. I want just some basic terms that they can start to hear, and it's repeated and it's repeated, and somebody is not out in left field wondering, oh, what's that word mean and whatever. And that takes monitoring because staff has to be on board. And then I use the word session. And a session to me could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 hours. And when I say 5 hours, we're not gonna have a session for 5 hours. I should say 5 sessions or 5 times, because I want them to be able to demonstrate at least a comparable or an acceptable demonstration of something. And way back with fundamentals, and I forgot to say that in physical literacy, in cognitive literacies, there are 26 alphabet numbers. In physical literacy, you can move 4 directions. linear, forward and back, lateral, left and right, and diagonal, either forward or backward, diagonal. And then the fifth one is vertical. And so we want to introduce the directions and spatial awareness and body awareness in these four areas. And we start in athletic position, and there is a whole I'm sorry, we start in power position, and there's a whole sequence of how to teach the the power position. But I never have the kids in shoes. I want them either in stocking feet or bare feet, or et cetera, because a shoe really screws up what the the sole of the foot can feel. But a power position, athletic position, and then we'll have our first movement, and that would be either linear, and you're going to start with your support on your left, stand on your left leg, and push and step forward with your right foot, and then feel that position. And it's sort of I'll use the word, a very modified lunge position, but I want them to push with the support foot. And then after they've stepped out, I want them to push with that foot and step back so they're back in athletic position. That's what I call static. You're only making a step and step back. You're in a basically a stationary position. And then you can do that lat or diagonally. You'll step on a clock. I have them think of a clock, and many of them with digital clocks have a whole concept of what a face of a clock looks like. But usually I'll have them step at either 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, something like that, or 11 and 1 when they get started, and then a little wider so they get a little bit of variance of a diagonal feel, and then lateral left and right, and then just some spatial awareness. Can you? I might put if there are a number of them, I'll have them I'll put them on all four sides of a small square. And the goal is to get across the square without running into each other. So they learn not to bounce off each other, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second session, and again, the second session, these 8 things may take 8 different sections. They may take more. It depends on how well the kids can demonstrate and how well they can control their movement. The second quote session is review the first session again. We're trying to build, I use that word, body armor, the myelinization of and I know at a youth it's very difficult, but getting them into what's it feel like? What's it feel like? This kind of thing. Well, then, second session, just we go into some balance, and you can do a ton of stuff, but just up on the ball of the foot, and then hold. And then you can close your eyes, you can have your hands in a different position. Your feet could be either very close together or wide, etc. A lot of just when they feel, and then up and just hold. And then you can add a shoulder shrug to that. And then you could add close your eyes to that. They're just endless things. And when I say this, I'm not trying to say, well, that's what you need to do. I would hope that everyone that's viewing this would say, okay, those are work. What can you add? What added things can you create? And then off that, we start to get a little bit in the area of vertical. We go to rockers first, where they just learn to move from the support of the heel up onto the ball of the foot, and then back and rocking just back and forth, and how well they can control their center of mass, their base of support, their line of force as they are moving through this motion. And the idea of just learning to control the movement and learning to feel what that movement feels like. And then we'll do snap downs and just let them get a little bit of an arm action first, get the arm action to move, and then what's it feel like to get up on the ball of the foot, and then what's that elbow drive, and then the jump itself, and let them come back down, and then we'll start them in a narrow foot position, and then have them drop into a automatic or into an athletic position. So, and that's a series of I'll use the word sessions also, where it takes some time. And then Dan Johns does just an awesome job with what he calls get backups. And you can Google him, and he does just a neat thing, because I think kids, you can talk about base of support, and you can talk about center of mass, and you can talk about line of force, but it doesn't mean anything until they can experience it. And these get back up series with Dan Johns, just he does a great job. And it it causes the kid to start to own their own movement. And that owning your own movement is absolutely crucial as they get older. They've got to be able to control PEL, posture, arms, and legs. And that's the fundamental fundamental and foundational phases. And then or the first part. And then we can go to the foundation. And this basically is the same thing. It's
What slide are you on right now?
Yep.
What slide are you on right now? What number?
I don't know. I have no idea. Hang on a minute. I don't know, Pat. If I get out of the screen, I might get all screwed up, and which would not be good. Why?
Just want to know, because we're about an hour and 15 minutes in, and I want to know if we
Oh,
can
so
continue next time.
Pat, can I finish this? I only have about 2 slides left, I
You got it.
think.
You got it. No
Okay.
problem. No problem.
Very quickly reviewing the foundation slides, and then just getting into, I want kids to create activities to keep them moving, and reviewing the power and athletic position, the tumbling and the plyometric stuff, the get back up stuff, expanding their vocabulary on movement, and just keeping everything going. And this is the last part of where we put in balance, moving back and forth on just a line, and you can add all sorts of variations. This is heel to toe touch. You can add close your eyes. You can put your hands in different spots. And then we do a this is a lot of number 16, a 3-position clock touch. You're going to stand on your left foot, and you're going to move your right foot up to a 12 o'clock position, back to the center, over to a 3, back to the center, back to a 6, and then switch on your other side and go 12, 9, and 6, etc. And then you can do a 3-line diagonal touch, where if you took a clock and you put a cone at either 10, 12, and 2, and then you would touch your foot. Left would be on 10, left would be on 12, and then switch to the right foot, etc. And you move your feet diagonal. You step out and then step back. A great number 19 is stepping in the box drill, where you step forward and then bring your feet, and then step lateral, bring your feet to athletic position, step backwards, to athletic position and then step back. So you literally form a box and you can go clockwise and counterclockwise. And then we can do a lateral movement with a 2-cone touch out of a deep squat. And then when and if they're ready, they can go into basic fundamental plyometrics. We start really elementary with eccentric, where they just step off and stick. We keep that level maybe 6 inches. I want them to stop and I don't want them to sink. I want them to stop. And then the concentric is jumping up on something, and that's 6 inch, whatever. I want them to land in athletic position, and then reactive. We can do hip reactions and et cetera, et cetera. And then I want them to crawl, and then I want them to be able to tumble forward, shoulder, um, um, uh, forward, backward, shoulder, and seal. And that's about it. Questions, comments?
I got a
Okay,
question.
who's up?
I'd like to see Larry demonstrate a seal roll, please. I have no idea what that
Seal
is.
roll, I might.
I was taking notes. I also have a question here by Shaughnessy because he had to leave. And I'll send you that question, Larry, and you can kind of look at it next time. Um, I think there were some
Now,
things I thought
if
that
I
were
can interrupt for just a second, the
sure.
next series will go from the development stage into application into performance, the last 3 stages.
Okay. What I want you
So
to think about, go ahead.
how old are the kids at this stage that you're doing this?
They could, quite frankly, they could be at any stage. I, you know, if I'm going to put you at a development or at my advanced stages, I want you to at least be able to demonstrate. Now, I wouldn't spend a lot of time. I wouldn't spend if you were a ninth grader, I might want to see if you could do a shoulder roll. I might want to see how's your coordination, and I'm not trying to insult you. I just want I can't expect you to do something unless I know that you're capable of doing it. And I just might want to just see what it's certainly not intended to intimidate you, and I would never isolate you or select you, but I might just see, especially if I were to watch your movements. We haven't done a lot of dynamic movement yet of linear, lateral, the fundamental, running, backpedaling, karaoke, skip, lunge, all that. That's gonna I'm going to spend more time with that and the other ones. Not that we don't do it with the foundational stage or fundamentals, foundational stage, but I want to focus more on that at the developmental stage.
Okay, so ideally, in a perfect world, how old are the stages that you've just gone through?
Well, how old is the what? I'm sorry.
In an ideal world, how old are the kids in these different stages that you just went through?
Well, I would want them by grade 3.
Okay, I lost track of the grades um, back when we were doing the other stuff. That's why I was asking.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Now,
yeah,
that
okay.
doesn't mean that does not mean that I would hold a talented kid deliberately there, but I would just like to I'll use the word check off. Can you do this?
Oh, no, I get it. I was just
I
for
think
some reason in my head, I lost track of where we were on the age group. So
I think
not a big deal. That's my fault.
Yeah.
I
And I
think what
gotta say,
go ahead.
Larry, did you do this PowerPoint yourself? Because if you did, you got to be the world's greatest PowerPoint maker.
Oh God, no. I have very talented athletes that I
Really?
I suck at technology, as you know.
That's why I was asking.
No, I have very talented. I have a young lady that's just she's awesome.
That's the best looking PowerPoint presentation I've ever seen.
It's pretty dynamic. I
I'll
think,
call her and tell her you said that.
I
I'm
think what,
embarrassed now that I put mine up there.
nah, I think what we need to do, Larry, next time, um, I want, I, I want you to talk about power position and athletic position. I know
Okay,
what you're talking about. I don't know if everybody else does. I know
okay,
what you're talking about. So we got to do that. When I looked at things I'm just looking at, I wrote some things on is adaptation. It's interesting you're talking of how long does it take a kid to adapt to this stuff? Who knows? You know, and
right.
the issue you were talking about those kids in a camp where that kid that's a ninth grader, he's probably going to adapt a lot faster than a fifth grader, you know, because he may have some common knowledge or some of that knowledge in already, but if he doesn't, he may not adapt that fast at all, you know, so we really don't know.
Right.
Um,
Well, when these kids come in, you never know what level they're really at
yeah.
unless they've been in the program for a while.
Well, yeah, you're right. And I think that's the thing about benchmarks when you talked about benchmarks, and I'm just throwing my stuff out here because things I wrote down. I think that's where we're really missing in all of education. We don't really does the first grade or the first grade teacher talk with the second grade teacher about what they want them to know when they come to the second grade? I don't know if we do that. You
I
know, I
don't think
think
there's
we've
enough of
lost all
that
that.
communication. I agree.
Yeah,
I,
I don't
I,
think we've
I
done that.
absolutely agree.
I've said for years that we should have high school PE teachers talking to middle school PE teachers or what are the expectations we want when they come to the high school level? Because I don't think we do that. I think we're just totally, especially in physical education, but I'm not sure it's not all education because we've reached this level of don't make them feel bad, pass them on. Well, you know, the problem with that old thing about scaffolding, if they don't know what they're supposed to know in the first grade, they're sure as hell not going to get in the second grade. And they're going to,
Right,
by the time we get to the fourth grade, you're just hoping, a wish, and a prayer they got the stuff they're supposed to get in first and second because it's just not happening. So I think that's one place we fall not only in physical education, but in the total education thing itself. So start out next time, you know, just let's identify the difference because I don't know, Grant, I don't know if you do, Julie, tell me if you do or don't, but there is a difference between what he calls power position and athletic position. So
yeah. And I
I
didn't
think we
cover
need to
that because
clarify.
I didn't think there was enough time.
Yeah,
But
no, I'm sure. And you know, the thing is, if we were hands-oning this thing, we would be showing it.
oh
And
yeah,
that,
oh yeah.
so that's the difference. Other than that, yeah, I agree with Grant. That's a pretty awesome PowerPoint. You know, and I've seen it before, so I know. But anybody else have any questions right now?
None for me.
So,
Julie, when
so
you look at this stuff, I do have a question for you, Julie. When you look at this stuff, and I'm not saying you're old, but you're in the masters, and like you
Thanks,
did make a
Pat.
comment on some things. Well, hey, I had a
it gets
conversation
Thanks,
with my
Pat.
cousin, and Larry, you'll appreciate this one because Mark's 76 and I'm going to be 75. And we were talking about it, you know, when my aunt dies, which I don't want to happen. But I said, Mark, we're the oldest guys around. And he goes, yeah, I was talking to these old guys and that I talk to now. And he goes, remember the old, you know, 25, 30 years ago when we were kids, we talked about the old guys sitting on the count on the corner over there. We're the old guys. And we're all getting to realize that. But I want you to look at this thing, Julie. Are you still there?
Yes, sorry, you were on
Okay,
mute.
I want you to look at this thing as what you see, you know, and I want your opinion on this. And so I want you to think about it and write some things down. What you see in reference to this stuff with the people you just discussed at the Masters. because, well, what are some of these things you're not seeing with them? Because I said something a couple weeks ago, we were talking about something, and I said, are we not talking about the same guy here? We've broken it down so we're so specific in certain things. Well, here's Matt. This guy works with older people. This guy works with younger people. This guy works with this level. But the bottom line, when you look at all the things we see in fitness, there's 8 or 9 things that Grant, what Drobick put in his book. Hell, this is all the same stuff. And we're probably not seeing that with older people too. So I want you to have some opinions on that, Julie, because you're seeing a lot of these things because you go to a lot of these masters deals. That's my
Hey,
I
two
do.
cents on it at this
hey,
point.
Pat.
Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to say something. When you're asking Julie about what she sees at the Masters,
Yeah.
the one thing you have to remember is that when you specialize in a skill, or in this case weightlifting, a lot of these things go away because you don't need them to do the skill weightlifting.
Yeah, I agree with
But you
that.
do
Okay.
need them.
I would
Okay,
think,
me,
so
If
well,
you
but
specialize like that, you need them especially as a master in your everyday life.
well now, I would respectfully disagree because there's some of the things that you don't use in sport. So let's take a powerlifter. Okay, how many powerlifters have you seen that can move well laterally? The more strength you try to develop, the less or you're going to take away something. Okay, and in one of these things is in the case of a powerlifter is movement variability. You can only go one direction because that's what the sport demands.
right.
Okay, so is that a bad thing? No, if powerlifting is what you're doing. For me, it would be a bad thing because I don't do powerlifting and I don't need it, but I need to be able to move around and do different things, right? And so I think when you start talking about it's bad because we lose some of these things, you're going to lose them because of the nature of what you're doing. I remember Jeff Macy one time, probably 20, 25 years ago, we're riding around in the car, and he brought up a very good point. He said, when I went to the Olympic training, he said, I was a pretty good athlete when I went to the Olympic Training Center. He goes, I feel like I lost some of my athleticism while I was at the training center. Well, because why? Well, because the focus of what he was doing was what his job was at the time was to be a weightlifter. He didn't have to change direction and do all these other things. And would being able to change direction really well help him in the sport of weightlifting? Not necessarily. Okay, lateral change of direction I'm talking about. Okay, so you lose it. So
I think you get to older
go
people.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. I think I know what you're going to say, but go
as we
ahead.
get to people and when we talk about masters weightlifting, that's great. They can do the weightlifting part of it, but they still got to climb up the stairs to get to the stage, and they still got to walk back to their room. And I'm not sure that we're not totally missing the boat by just focusing those folks on that one thing.
I heard you,
I don't know
Well,
if that.
and that's what I agree with.
Yeah.
I,
So I think that's something we have to look at, but I think it's the same thing when we look at kids. We start these kids to play one sport. And how much do we really neglect by just getting them to play one sport? And then all of a sudden these injuries come about because they're just overuse injuries, and we just have lost that, and we've become, I don't know, I think sometimes I look at it, I think we've come so specialized we forgot about the overall. And one of the things I think it was Canada that said you build the athlete first and then let them choose the sport. And we're not doing that. We're choosing the sport first and then just developing a sport athlete. And then that guy becomes a mess, down the line. And I think the tragedy of youth sport is it used to be we had said that all these kids would quit by the time they got to high school, which was 14 or 15. And as Larry said in the Aspen project, it's now moved it down to about 11 and 12 that they're quitting. And that is a tragedy. That is a tragedy. And the other part is, we said this years ago, Larry. I know you were sitting there when a certain individual who's a great intellectual, thinks he's the smartest guy in the world. And Vern Gambetta, Jimmy Radcliffe says, you know what? You may think that all the guys that work with those 12-year-old middle league players are going to be professional coaches, but they're not. They're going to be moms and dads, and we have to go in and teach those moms and dads. And I think that's what's really important about videotaping this stuff. I'm going to turn this recorder off now, but I'll put this on. I think the important thing about videoing all this is to be able to give this stuff to people because we need to teach parents how to coach movement because they're the ones that are going to work with our kids.